Episode 1 of Retrospective Replay, a serialized episodic podcast taking an in-depth look into video games. This is Season 1, Vagrant Story. My name is Ian, and with me tonight I have Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ian.
You know, this is an episodic podcast about various retro games, and for the next 18 to 20 weeks, it will be this one here, Vagrant Story. This was released 21 years ago now. If you played this original time around, you're probably about 10 years old. Let's just get into it. We'll slap the games in the PlayStation, or if you are playing like us, we are using emulation, which, you know, allows for a bit of cheating here and there, which I'll explain later. But anyway, we start the game. Game boots up and we have a intro sequence. The intro sequence is a very upbeat, kind of aggressive music with this woman dancing, and there's no real context given here, but she's a dancer who has a massive tattoo on her back.
She's a belly dancer. I just want to make a point there.
Yeah, she's kind of like a belly dancer.
Yeah.
It's huge, and then you see the protagonist loading up. You see him, his bow gun, as they call it. I just call it a crossbow, but he's loaded his bow gun and he has his sword, and then you see sort of a wyvern. So we hit the menu screen, hit start, we get into it. So game starts out 2:32 a.m. at the Duke Barbados Manor. The manor is on fire, and the sky is highlighted orange, while the manor is kind of what would you say, like a green, like an overcast, sort of like a dark green. It's just, it really highlights the fact that it's on fire.
Yeah. Can I ask a clarification, just for those of us who are... What's the difference between a wyvern and a dragon?
A wyvern and a dragon. Well, I'm glad you asked, because I looked this up. So a dragon has 4 totally separate appendages plus wings, while a wyvern, I believe its wings and arms are all in one.
Is this like the difference between a moth and a butterfly?
What's the difference between a moth and a butterfly?
I think it's something similar, where they have 4 wings or 2 wings, or it's in parts, or is it part of their body? Maybe it's... Yeah, I mean, we don't have to get into epidemiology. But yeah.
No, that's fine. But I mean, later on, as you...
But in the game, when you're fighting him, he's referred to as a dragon, I'm pretty sure. I know when you're hitting him, it's dragon, but later on they talk about the fact that it's a wyvern.
And I think they also refer to it as a worm as well, but that's WYRM. And the scene then opens up to, what would you say, he's a very well-groomed type of guy, isn't he? Blonde hair.
Yeah, I think later on you find his name is it Guildenstern?
I think it might be Guildenstern.
Yeah.
It opens up, and it's this guy, like Guildenstern, and he's withdrawing his sword from a body that then proceeds to fall to the ground.
Yeah.
A second knight walks in, and Guildenstern asks if they've found Sydney. The knight responds with no, so Guildenstern just says, split the knights into 2 teams, one to put the fires out, and the other to exterminate the traitors. So right now, there's not a massive deal of context. You know, we're not really sure who Guildenstern is.
Yeah, you don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. I mean,
Don't know if it's a good guy or bad guy. Don't know who the traitors are, or why it's on fire,
or who he stabbed. I mean, it's not clear what's going on at all, to be honest with you.
Well, no, presumably a traitor, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. We get a screen wipe to credits, so I quite like this. It's artistic, it's like an open film, really, isn't it?
Well, I think it's very retro. Like if you ever had a camcorder or stuff back in the 90s, you know, all of the effects of like a side wipe was very much the rage back
I'm
then.
just waiting for a star wipe to come in, like Homer.
Dad, there are other wipes besides star wipes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's tastefully done, and I think as well the fact that they've integrated the credits into the opening scenes is also interesting.
This is very reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid. The Metal Gear Solid was released on September 98, while Vagrant Story came out in early 2000s, almost 21 years to the day, in fact. A week before the PS2 launched in Japan.
Wow, okay, yeah, that's odd. I didn't think that Metal Gear Solid was before this, but yeah.
After the wipe, we cut back to the action, and it's the introduction to the hero, and this is a very common sort of introductory trope, isn't it? It's camera is high up, looking at a castle keep, and then the camera then changes and shows feet running in the rain, and then there's a few quick cuts back and forth from the top to the bottom. If you've ever played Symphony of the Night, Castlevania on the PS1, it's got a similar sort of introduction for the hero as he's running towards the castle gate.
I will say that the music is very atmospheric.
Yes.
I think they nailed that, particularly at the start.
The music is really fantastic throughout the entire game from memory. There's not so much many tunes you could kind of hum to, but it's super atmospheric, like Resident Evil style music, you know.
Yeah, and then the happy music is very much, I think we were saying previously, like Zelda.
As he comes to a stop, did you notice the soft blur effect?
No?
He comes to a stop and there's a soft blur effect, which is very similar to the same sort of blur effect you would get on the screen when you were fighting Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid. It's like a very soft blur. I like it. I do like it.
I did think later on in this, when Sydney was kind of hovering and stuff, that it's very Psycho Mantis-esque.
The camera cuts behind the hero. Because right now, I don't think we've been given his name. We know he's called Ashley Riot. I mean, that's given very soon.
Well, then the other thing is, you don't know at this point if he's a hero or not. Well, you probably do, but he could be anybody.
Well, he could be anyone, but very quickly it becomes, obvious that he's our guy, our hero. The camera cuts behind him, and it's low down, showing you the rear of Ashley and the grand scale of the castle. And right now, you're thinking, am I going to explore this whole castle? You don't know what's going to happen. Ashley looks over to his right. In the wheel that keeps the castle gate open and closed, there's a piece of 2x4 stopping it from rolling. He hits that with a sword and causes the gate to crash down. And what that reminds me of is, if you've ever seen Black Dynamite, there's a scene in Black Dynamite where...
yeah, it's on my to-watch list.
Yeah. So there's a scene in Black Dynamite where Michael Jai White playing Black Dynamite, walks into a bowling alley. He goes in to interrogate them, and they kind of call him names, tell him to get out. And he turns around and goes to walk out, and they laugh at him. But as he gets to the door and he stops and he locks it, turns around, then the camera cuts to the outside, and someone just comes crashing through the window as he kicks everyone. So it's a similar thing. It's like, I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me. You kind of assume that this guy's going to be he's going to kick some ass, really. We get more screen wipes, and then we wipe back to a different part of the castle, and there's this skinny guy. This unnamed person, he says to somebody, show them who we're dealing with, and to torch the chambers and kill all the hostages. Did you notice how he struts off and slams the door? It's a bit weird. He's like arms out.
Yeah.
Struts off. I wasn't a huge fan. Wasn't a huge fan of the animation at that point, but it's fine. It's forgivable. It only lasts a couple of seconds. The camera then pans back to Ashley, and he's hiding behind some boxes, and the camera deliberately focuses on a smaller box on top, so that's going to fall off in a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
The two guys that were standing with the one that's just strutted off tells another person, we've got no time, and let's finish this before the blades arrive. At that point, that's when Ashley then knocks off the box, the smaller box, and alerts the two guards. He then draws his sword and says, here we go. So he's not a stealthy guy, is he, really? I mean, later on something else similar.
He's no Solid Snake.
This is Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?
He's definitely no Solid Snake, and he's got no cardboard box to hide in either.
No, although maybe that might come later on.
Well, yeah. So we hit our first piece of gameplay. Super quick battles. You fight two humans, 2 hits, both go down.
Yeah, but the big thing about that is the way that it's done. It's picking body parts, so the game freezes, and you select a body part, so it's like Fallout.
But yeah, so you press circle, it brings up a sphere around you, which is your range of attack, and whatever's in the range can be attacked, whether that is an enemy or some inanimate objects in some certain cases. You can select the target, and if there's multiple body parts in that target, so you can target head, torso, left arm, left leg, right leg. Sometimes if somebody turns, you might just be able to hit an arm, say.
So anyone who's played the later Fallout games, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, knows the idea that time freezes.
Yeah.
And you get to focus and select a body part.
Yes.
And it tells you the amount of damage that it'll do with your weapon on that part, and then you select it, and then...
Yeah, plus the percentage to hit the part as well, yeah. It doesn't hold your hand, though. It doesn't, if it was made nowadays, time would freeze and it would pop up and it would say, 2 enemies are approaching you. Press circle to enable battle mode, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah,
none of this.
But I mean, there is no instructions, there's no tutorial. I'm assuming when this game would have come out, you'd have had a book. A booklet would come with it.
Oh, of course you had a booklet, but...
Like back in the day.
By the time I was at the age when this came out, I didn't really I didn't read the booklets.
I never read the
per
books
se.
anyway. I just always played the game and you work it out as you're going along.
Exactly, and this time, I had some memories of how it worked, but I worked out as I went along anyway. Ashley beats the two guys and he walks into the castle. He gets into, it almost looks like an entrance to a church, doesn't it? It's like a long hallway with pillars down each side, which you could hide behind, and he presses up to a door at the end, and he overlistens a conversation between two people. The two people talk about if they've found it, but we don't know what it is, and the report that nothing has been found. We then found out someone's talking to Sydney with the line, "There is nothing, Sydney." He tells him to keep looking because he doesn't want to leave empty-handed after coming this far. At that point, Ashley hides behind a pillar and 2 or 3 people come running out of the door and they run straight past him. What I really noticed here was, though, the models had very, very thin legs. It looked a little bit odd.
Yeah.
I mean, they are very low poly models because everything is 3D, so they're going to be low poly models, but it still just looked a bit funny. The camera moves inside and Sydney is talking to the guy that struck off before. They are talking about it and does it exist? And Sydney questions him if he doubts his power, and that's when Harden basically, he gets very, very scared and he says no. But he is worried, in fact, that the won't be able to escape, so Sydney tells him he's happy to leave, but he wants to grab the boy. At this point, we've seen Sydney, which they've been talking about, and how would you describe him?
So, as you say, he's very skinny.
Yeah.
I'd say he's very effeminate. I thought it was a woman at first.
So he dresses. He's got like this half skirt, hasn't he? It's like
yeah.
But then it's open at the front. But he's wearing like trousers, dark trousers. He has metal arms, pointy Freddy Krueger style fingers.
Yeah. So his arms are pretty much, they look like metal arms. He's got.
Yeah, and then he's got a huge tattoo on his back as well. Looks like the same tattoo as a woman we saw in the introduction film.
Yeah, and he's got blonde kind of. I don't know what kind of style that is.
Oh, his hair, it's like a bob, isn't it?
Yeah, some kind of a bob.
It's like a blonde bob. Sydney turns around to go to pick up a sword, but then we hear off screen, "Don't move." He turns around and it's Ashley who's got who says, "I have a bowgun pointed at your heart." And I googled this, and bowgun and crossbow seem to be a bit synonymous with each other.
Yeah, it's effectively a crossbow.
Yeah, I would call it a crossbow. I mean, I did read one point that said all bowguns are crossbows, but not all crossbows are bowguns, which is kind of like, all IPAs are beer, but not all beers are IPA. The term bowgun actually turns up in other games as well. Monster Hunter and Fire Emblem. I've not played either of these games, so for me, I just call it a crossbow. Sydney instantly recognises that Ashley's not a knight. Ashley tosses him a rope and tells him to bind his legs, so it's not the guy's first rodeo. He knows what he's doing, he's getting him to immobilise himself before he then approaches him.
Did you mean the pun there?
No, I didn't. No, I did not. I never thought about that.
There you go.
Sydney then says he recognises Ashley as a risk breaker, and that's when you really see the tattoo on his back. Sydney reaches for his sword and lunges, only to be shot by Ashley straight in the chest, isn't it?
Yeah, straight to the heart, directly.
Yeah, straight through the heart. As Sydney is on the ground, dead, Harden walks back in with the child under his arms. Ashley picks up his bowgun, turns around to confront Harden, but then gets tackled by Sydney.
I'm pretty sure it's Ashley goes to check to see if Sydney is dead. Because he does check it. I'm pretty sure he goes to check his vitals.
Yeah, you're right. So Ashley goes to check Sydney's vitals to see that he is dead. And that's when Harden walks back into the room and he's got a child under his arm. So Ashley turns around and that's when he gets tackled by Sydney. So Ashley falls to the ground, and even though Sydney's still got the bolt in his chest, and not only is it a chest, when the camera moves around you can see the bolt is right through his entire body and the head of the bolt is sticking out of his back. While Ashley's on the ground, Sydney then tells Harden to go to Le Monde. Sydney attacks Ashley, but he dodges, and he's very surprised at this point, which he would be, why Sydney is alive, and he asks how and why. Then Ashley says, "Leave the back from the grave stuff to fairy tales." And did you notice how they spelled fairy?
Yeah.
For fairy tales?
Yeah.
Which, what I understand, is just Old English. There's a couple of Old English references throughout this game, which we'll get into later. That sticks out straight away, so it's spelled Faerie. It's quite a nice little touch. Sydney drops his sword, and he pulls out the bolt. And he gives a proper bad guy line, doesn't he? And he goes, "You've given me quite a scratch," even though, he's got a hole.
Well, yeah, he pulls it out. He drops down though because it's obviously painful. And then he gives a bad guy, as you say, you've given me quite a scratch.
Yeah, and then he says, "Show a little more respect for fairy tales, risk breaker."
It's like Monty Python. 'tis but a scratch
Yeah.
where the guy's arm is cut off.
Yeah, the Black Knight, yeah. So at this point, this is when he calls for his dragon/wyvern, and he shouts Datok. And Datok could be the name, or it could be the language.
So it might be a command, or it might be that his name is Datok.
Yeah, so it could be a command. It could almost sound like Klingon as well. The camera pans up. There's a glass sort of, architecture, like a ceiling, but it's stylized. The wyvern crashes from the ceiling, but it's damaged and it's got bars sticking out of its head.
Yeah, I mean, that's weird. I didn't get that either. I mean, why did it have things sticking out of it?
Maybe we just want to crash through the ceiling. Maybe some of
maybe.
The window frame could have stuck in its head. Sydney says, "Apologise, not my time to toy with you." And the camera then jumps again tries to show you the scale of the wyvern, because when it goes to the gameplay, you can't actually see how big it is, but it is quite big. We get some more gameplay now. Eventually, I actually got damaged on the first with the two men, and on this fight, it's healed you, which you might not have, because the other fight's very easy. I just pressed the wrong button.
Yeah.
But again, it's another easy fight.
I was very disappointed about this fight, to be honest with you, because it was very easy. It was very. I mean, I'm hoping that this is just the first dragon of maybe other dragons, because in the opening credits, there's a big dragon breathing fire and stuff, and then this dragon appears so early in the game, and you're like, oh no, this is something massive so early on.
Yeah.
And 3 hits and he disappears. I mean, I was slightly. Maybe they didn't want to put too much on you, but it did seem quite straightforward for such a large enemy.
Yeah, no, it was straightforward, but I mean, this entire section is skippable, as you found out, so it's just a prologue to set the scenes. It does get a lot harder.
It's more like a quick time event than anything.
It is. I think you can actually defeat this dragon, this boss, without even taking a hit if you're quick enough. I took 1 hit off it, but it was a magic spell that actually damaged like 4 separate areas, but it wasn't big damage.
Okay.
Not at all, so it was pretty easy. So you defeat it, and it starts flashing, and it just kind of disappears into nothingness. It doesn't really it doesn't drop the ground dead or anything, it just disappears.
Yeah.
So Ashley walks up to the window as it's sort of the sun's rising, so you can assume it's been a few hours at this point.
It's a stained glass window, it's very nice.
It is very nice, and that's the window that Sydney jumped out of not so long ago, and he questions to himself, Le Monde, how you say it? Le Monde?
I suppose it's Le Monde. Well, it is. I think it's Le Monde. The other thing as well is that I think you also get the idea of Notre Dame when he's looking out that window. Again, the kind of...
Right.
I think more about the back end of Notre Dame. It's very. I found it very uplifting and stuff when it cut from that scene, because there was birds and there was bells, and it seemed like it seemed more akin to something that would be at the end of a game rather than just at the end of the first.
Yeah.
Because it's a period where he should be very worried, and there's just this magic guy who just died, and a dragon and all that's going on, and it seems it was kind of jarring, to be honest with you, for me, that it was very much happy music. As I say, the Zelda kind of happy music, but anyway.
The camera then cuts back inside, it pans behind Ashley, and it slowly moves into the path of the sun and shows a solar flare. We then get a black screen and the words Vagrant story flash up.
Before then, that's kind of the title screen to me, I guess, really. The intro is...
Yep, it was just one intro, and that's the title screen. So then we're hit with a loading screen, and it's a quote by AJ Durai. You got that noted down?
No, I don't know who that person is. I did not.
Do you want me to read it?
No, I know the quote, but I think you should read it.
So the quote is, "The body is but a vessel for the soul, a puppet which bends to the soul's tyranny, and lo, the body is not eternal, for it must feed on the flesh of others, lest it return to the dust whence it came. Therefore must the soul deceive, despise, and murder men." So what do you think he's trying to say here? Is he trying to say that a soul can be transferred, like this, like soul transference, as in like another soul can inhabit another body?
We could get into deep philosophy here. I think as well you can read into it that the soul is the person, the body is but a vessel, and you must try to do whatever the hell you can to survive. Perhaps there are people, and I don't know whether or not this is linked to the religious cult that I think is referred to in this game, but a means of transcending your need for a single body or stuff that you can, as you say, transfer your soul or your essence around. I think that's the dark arts.
Yeah.
And then the people who are whatever you want, God-fearing in this game as well. And maybe that's the differences as well in that.
Yeah, no, that's true. So, I mean, what this sets us up as for really is that we know there's going to be, I mean, we already know there's magic, we know there's dragons, and we know there's going to be some dark stuff probably happening soon. You know, we're still on the intro here, which is, it's quite a lot to cover. We move into an interior, a bedroom. It's clearly a very rich man, because it's a huge four-poster bed. So we cut to the bedroom. We're not given the time, but, you know, you can assume it's a couple of hours later. And there's several men in the room, so there's a bit of a conversation going on.
Well, there's one main guy who's kind of on one knee, so kind of bowed down, and he's debriefing the guy who's lying in the bed.
Yeah. And he says, it wasn't the Knightsmen, but the Cardinals. And the man replies, Knights of the Cross, led by Guildstern. We know now that, you know, you're given that Guildstern is the blonde-haired guy.
And he refers to them as the Crimson Blades.
Yeah, and someone adds that, doesn't they? Say the Crimson Blades are in direct service to the Cardinal. Then Guildstern led his men to Le Monde after Sydney. So they're chasing Sydney and they're trying to get to...
But yeah, so it kind of sets up that there's a number of different groups of people, protagonists, if you will.
Well, yeah, or antagonists. I mean, we're not sure. So we know we've got the Crimson Blades. We know about Sydney and his men, and we know about our guy Ashley and his organisation, which hasn't directly been named yet, but will soon.
No, yeah, so you have the Cardinal, who seems to be a powerful person, and his blades. You have the Risk Breaker. Well, then you have Sydney and his whatever he's up to, and then you have this old guy in the bed.
Right, yeah, the man in the bed who is Duke Barbado, I believe. He orders his men to set fire to the manor. And did you notice they look at each other in disbelief? Like, did he really just order that?
Yeah, so that's his manor, Duke Barbado's manor that was the opening scene of the guy getting stabbed in there, that was being under siege, if you like, from Sydney and his people.
Yeah.
So it seems that the Duke isn't there. He wasn't at that manor. He's outside of it.
Yeah,
so
he's clearly filthy rich.
Yeah, and then he says, you know, as you say, burn the manor. And he sets up a kind of a deception or something to cover up some tracks, because he says to burn it down in the guise of a Crimson Blade. So he's saying dress up as one of the guys who we're looking for, and burn it down, so that people would think that it's the Crimson Blades that burnt the place to the ground. Despite the fact that we saw Guildenstern telling his men to put out the fires.
Yeah, so they look at each other in disbelief. And the Duke responds that a Wyvern was used and there could be no witnesses, and one of the men replies back, but your family. The Duke then says, I don't care, burn it down. So he's a pretty cold guy, right? So he's got family or extended family in there. The conversation then turns political when the Duke asks about the Parliament. Yeah,
but there's one thing that Duke says first, though, when he seems to be trying to cover for Sydney as well. He doesn't want people to know that this Sydney guy has control over a dragon, or that any of this magic or stuff exists. He's willing to burn down his manor with his family just to cover the fact that in case people see a dragon. And he says Sydney used a dragon. So he seems to have some knowledge of what Sydney's doing, and it's more like, oh, well, you know, he made a mistake by using that and now I have to cover for him.
Yeah, it does seem that way. He's definitely got some sort of allegiances with Sydney.
Yeah, they've got something going on together. So, you know, whether they've been working together before and now they've fallen out or something like that.
Yeah, Duke then calls them meddling risk breakers when he finds out that they've been involved, and he asks what to do at the guy's knee, and the Duke says that he wants him to follow Sydney and deal with him there at Le Monde.
Yeah, he says it's yours, so basically you can go and lock down Le Monde and then deal with the problem.
The Duke then asks about his son, stating that his is light and soul. Doesn't get a response on that, but the scene then ends with the camera looking at a family portrait.
Yeah, and the son, the young boy's name is young Lord Joshua. So that must be his son, and he seems to care about him quite a lot. That's probably as well why Sydney has taken him as some form of collateral.
So we fast forward, 11:42 a.m. It's a new scene. There's two dead men with a woman looking over them. It then cuts to some text, some law, which says, Le Monde is an old town with a history of over 2,000 years. Its walls have seen many battles. They are stronger than the mightiest forts of Valindia. And as the sun wheels through the sky, the beauty of their shifting colours surpasses that of any palace. There's a second one, which I won't read verbatim, but it says a cathedral towers over the centre, and it's a symbol of Le Monde's indomitable spirit and in the holy ground of the devout priesthood. And then it says, at its height, there was 5,000 people, but an earthquake 25 years ago kind of brought the town to an end, basically. So what I think we understand is that there was an earthquake, maybe it stopped people able to get to the town, maybe everything fell down, maybe everybody died, so it's now like in destitute, really, it's derelict.
Yeah, so it's basically, fallen apart from a really strong earthquake, and it seemed to be quite an important center, religious center as well.
We then cut to Ashley walking up some steps, and he's talking to that woman we just saw before and asking what her update is. She tells him about the 2 dead men that she found, which she refers to as sentinels.
So a sentinel is a guard, basically.
She then asks if this stairway is the only way in, because of some earthquakes that happened many years ago that we mentioned. That answer is yes, this is the only way that can get in there. She then talks about agents that were sent into the Mullenkamp base. No one returned, presumably killed by men.
They thought that this is the Mullenkamp base.
Yeah, well, that's it. The venture downstairs to the wine cellar, and we are hit with almost a bit of surprise. It's a report, isn't it? It's a bit of text that appears on screen, which is a report from, presuming the VKP office. Because it says, according to the survivors, our comrade Agent Riot headed out for Learmont before noon. Of course, the reports are vague, and we cannot deny the possibility of inaccuracies. Yet, given that there is only one path to infiltrate Learmont, this office believes the report to be valid. It's almost like this story is a retelling of Ashley's report, possibly.
Yeah, maybe.
So they get downstairs, there's 2 dead men. The woman says, what's this? And Ashley just replies, it's what I'm here to find out. And as you said before, that's when he says, it is very fortified for a wine cellar. Now, is that a pun? Fortified wine cellar?
Oh, it could be.
So he opens up the door to go into the complex, and she asks him, are you planning to go alone? And he was saying he was a bit of a dick.
Yeah, I think he's a bit of a dick here, because he's just very, it's hurtful, and you can see that she's been hurt by it. He's like an agent with no combat experience would be a liability.
Yeah.
I think he's had something, he's a bit broken, I don't know, he just seems to be a bit of a, I mean, I guess, maybe he's a loner, maybe he's a go it on your own kind of person. Again, you can probably think of other characters in other games who are like that, but I think he's just become nicer to her later on. I hope he does.
From memory, I can't remember how much you see of her. Ashley wants to know about Sydney, and she responds. She tells him about Sydney's full name. It's Sydney Losterot, and he's the leader of a religious cult, Mullenkamp, and he's a self-proclaimed prophet of the apocalypse. And she talks about the Cardinal, or...
I think the VKP are people who are representing the sovereign or the king or whoever. And they're also, they also answer to the parliament. I think the Cardinal is part of that setup, but I think he has his own group of whatever the Crimson Blades are, that he works with them. I think the VKP are a separate group, the Risk Breakers.
Yeah.
The Cardinal and the VKP are of the same grouping.
Yeah.
But I think it's like it's kind of like the Three Musketeers. You have Cardinal Richelieu, but he has his own army. He's meant to be, the Musketeers are part of the King's troop, but as you would in like Dumas's book, the Cardinal has his own agenda and uses his own men to, obviously cause problems. So I think in the ideal world, or it's supposed to be that the Cardinal is part of the church. It's like church and state, that you have the church that's the Cardinal, you have the king and his knights and whatnot.
Yeah.
And in the normal run of things, the Cardinal follows the wishes of the king, but Cardinals as well have their own agenda sometimes. So it seems to be the case that the Cardinal is off doing his own things, or has his own agenda. And he obviously has a problem with Sydney.
Yeah, definitely. She says that their organisation, the VKP, they say he's not a prophet, that he is in arms with Duke Barbadora, and that the cult is a complete front for this relationship.
Yeah, it seems that the Duke and Sydney are working together as well, or have some kind of relationship.
But there's speculation between the two of them that maybe the attack on the manor was a falling out between the two.
Yeah.
Ashley then says, or could this be merely another one of the Cardinal's witch hunts? So obviously the Cardinal, maybe he's got a history of going after people for certain things. Maybe he's a bit senile.
Oh, I wouldn't say he's senile. I just think he's trying to consolidate power, and obviously the Sydney people are a threat to the religious power of whoever he represents, whatever his religion is.
Yeah, definitely. They definitely seem a threat. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going after them. This woman, who we don't know her name yet, I don't think at this point, she then says Sydney's different. What he says comes true. People call him a miracle in that he can guess the past of the people he meets and even read hearts. Followers devote body and soul to him, and that's when Ashley says, it sounds like you're quite taken with him yourself, as he turns away to walk away.
Yeah, it's basically he's saying you've got the hots for Sydney. Why don't you get a room?
Exactly. And this way she actually shouts him, doesn't she? She says Agent Riot, and I'm not sure if she's shouting him for the remark or she just wants to give him a bit more information before he walks away into the darkness, really.
I don't think so. I think it's more that she's kind of a bit sick of him at that point. This Sydney guy, for all of what we don't know about him, seems very charismatic as well, and he seems to have, people are drawn to him or to his power, and she... I don't know, is it because, she's a female character or whether or not it's more of another level where it's the case that she can seem drawn to him, drawn to the power that obviously this guy is, because she says, I think she makes reference to the fact that there's lots of prophets and there's lots of people, but he's different. He's a miracle. He actually, what he says or what he does actually comes true. But the Ashley guy seems to be very dismissive of anything. There's information in there, and she's kind of maybe warning him as well. This guy will get inside your head.
Yeah.
But he's just like, you got the hots for him, and then just walks off.
Well, he goes to walk off, and he turns back to her, and he says, "If I don't return by Morrow's Eve, inform HQ, won't you?" And he turns away. He doesn't even look back. So she says, "Godspeed." She then turns, walks up the stairs, and as she walks up the stairs, who's coming down the stairs? Sydney. And he's got, what we've not spoke about yet, which I really like, is the amount of expression you see on the characters' faces.
Yeah, he's got a grin, kind of like...
Yeah.
I wonder if he overheard their conversation as well, and heard what she had to say about him.
Right, yeah, I never thought of it that way, but maybe she did, and he thought,
She seemed to make the case that, he's quite a powerful person. He's not just another crazy prophet. He's somebody that, has obviously power. I also find it strange that the Ashley guy, is kind of dismissive, given that he just saw him basically come back from the dead shortly before that.
You don't know what's happened here. It just cuts, and it actually cuts to a screen with a bit of lore. It's another report, and it says, "Our men were murdered with swords, but the knight's wounds show they died by their own hands." Now, I mean, given the technology they have at the time, it's not going to produce a ballistics report, is it? I know ballistics are for guns, but, how have they proven that they've been caused by their own hands? And do they mean they've stabbed themselves or they've attacked each other?
They brought in the CSI team.
Well, that's it. They've brought the VKP CSI team in.
But I mean, obviously, that's not a throwaway comment. I think that's something that's important because obviously there may be a case here where you can actually control people to do what you want, and they've effectively made it so that these people have killed themselves.
Yes, exactly.
They've gotten into their head and killed them.
Yeah, it's a very strong possibility. It continues, "At present, we have taken the bodies into our custody and our specialists are conducting the examination." The camera moves into the next room, back to Ashley, and he sees wine. There's wine everywhere, and there's barrels of wine, there's boxes of wine, and then suddenly there's an earthquake. The camera starts to shake, and he looks at the door, and it's Resident Evil style groans. Within the music as well. So then we're given gameplay. So what's the first thing you do when you get control of Ashley at this point?
Well, you go and open a chest. Oh, well, no, you can go into first person view, yeah.
Well, you can go into first person.
That's what I did.
But and for me, I hit select because it was far too zoomed in. So you hit select. Well, actually, I'm using an Xbox 360 controller. The sacrilege. But anyway, you effectively hit select and it zooms out, and I much prefer that view. But yeah.
He makes a comment though, did he, or am I remembering this wrong? He says a strange power indeed.
Yes, he does. That's exactly what he says. He says a strange power indeed after the earthquake. And then we start in this room, and this room is called the entrance to darkness. So that shows you what you're going to do. So then you move out, you go to the next door, into the workers' break room. And in the workers' break room, we have two things. We have a chest that contains a leather glove, a buckler, and an axe called the Tovarich. And a save point. Tavarish. So I equip the leather glove and the buckler straight away. The buckler is very small. Have you noticed? This is what I don't like about one thing I don't like about the art style of the game. The shields tend to be very small.
Yeah.
barely bigger than the hand. It's almost like he's holding a saucer that he could pose on.
I thought when it said buckler first, I was thinking, is this because of the size? I was thinking, is it a plate or an armor plate or something? But no, it's a shield, and it's tiny.
And then we hit the save point.
The save point is a blue glowing circle in the ground, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a blue glowing circle on the ground, and it makes a sparkling sort of effect when you hit it. So that's it for this evening. We get to the save point, save our progress, and return to the real world. Thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it. We are on Facebook as Retrospective Replay if you want to join in on the conversation. You can also email us at retrospectivereplay@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or patch notes. Until next week, good night and Godspeed.